had a blue screen of death. VTune hard crashed my computer. That was really helpful. And then my BIOS took a while to start up. So it might happen a second time. Let's just see if we can get this to go. I think it configure analysis. Let's just see what it's doing. Hardware. We'll turn off additional performance insights. I wonder if it was yeah. Hi. Let's see if it. Okay, I'm gonna push the button again. It's not gonna crash. Come on, don't crash. Oh, it's not crashing. Okay, we're okay. It seems not to have found my project. It might be that the path is different. See game dev. Oh, that path is wrong. Great. Configure analysis. I need to add to the end of this the folder game, which is where my project is now. That's good. Come on. Okay, it's launching. Looking okay. Good. Okay, we're not dead yet. So when you run it in a profiler, it launches slower, which is, you know, kind of what you're trying to measure. While it's doing its thing, I'm just going to quickly bring my stream. Let's see what the damage is. What's the damage? 21 people. I lost 10 people at least. Oh well. 21. I'm glad that you guys are still here. Thank you for staying around. Okay, so this is struggling away, and it's lagging hard. Oh, it's running particularly well actually, but that was good enough. Now quit out of that. So while the game was running, every so often VTune was actually looking in on the program and measuring what was going on inside the code, what the stack trace was, where we were. It can also read counters out the CPU. I'm not sure if it's doing that because I think I turned it off because of the blue screen of death, but and it measures some idea of what's going on. So we can see that our program is mostly a single thread, which is not surprising, but that's not what I'm looking for. So let's see where the performance problems are. So I'm most interested in this period probably here at the start where it's loading, but we'll just start with this. So I'm following the hotspot. You see this is where the CPU time was. I'm just following that down into the program. A scene tree in it. That's not my scene tree, I don't think. So the worst stack goes into my code here. So make asteroid is indeed the hotspot of that line that's shown here. Idle. What's the hotspot here? Panic. Oh, that's the wrapper. Okay, fine. Update asteroid. Is it recreating the asteroid every frame? Ready. How many times does it do that, I wonder? But yeah, it seems like creating the asteroid mesh is still like a major performance problem. Eventually, yeah, but I mean, I'm just trying to narrow down the problem. What I'm looking for is a point where this time diverges into multiple parts. So you see how every time I go in to the stack, all of the time is in the first line, but at some point I'll go in, see here, there are 3 parts that have got problems now. So now I can see that the function, this function here, is actually kind of making a decision about the 3 parts, and this makes sense. This is a piece of code in so it's creating 3 different entities. This is a piece of code in my bridge between specs and Godot. Man, this font is really fiddly for you guys to see. I wonder if I can increase the zoom on this somehow. Where's the options? Options, general. Yeah, I don't see something for font. You know what, I guess you guys are going to have to, oh, there's a, yeah, you guys are going to have to just deal with it, I think. Let me just find my chat window, because that's my reference point for how much, where is my chat? It's a reference point for how much space you guys can see. we go. That goes there. This BSOD really put me off. So this is VTune if you've missed that part with performance profiling my application. So spatial. Okay, so there's a component here we're instantiating the scene. Yeah, but the reason why instantiating the scene is slow is because when it does create the scene, it calls back in. So it's not like it's Godot that's slow, it's still my Rust code. So everything I'm seeing here says it's my Rust code in charge of the slowdown. I'm running Rust in debug mode. I know it'll run a lot faster if I ran it in release. If I ran in release, it probably wouldn't be a problem. I realize that looking at a listing is probably really boring for you guys. Anyway, let me know if it's too boring, please, because I don't want to bore everyone to death. Okay, so it's regenerating them. So yeah, so it's exactly what I thought it would be. And when it's this function here, regenerating the normal maps shouldn't be too slow, because it's just looking up in a interesting. Okay, so we have a look at the listing of the code here. Okay, so what that's telling me is that there's a function call I'm making in my code that I didn't think was necessary, and I left it in anyway. No, we're in New Zealand, in Auckland. So it's morning time here. It's 8:48 AM on Tuesday the 18th. Okay. Let's just get rid of this window and close. It's on the other side of the world. But that's okay. Where are we going next? I was going to go to Asteroid. GD Asteroid. And in here, I've got this regen normal maps. That was one of the performance problems. I don't know if it was doing anything useful. I don't think it is. That's the array mesh. Yeah, I write unit tests as well. But at the moment, here, I'm looking at a performance problem to do with asteroids on my game. I just thought it'd be interesting to do this on stream. Of course, now that I'm doing on stream, I'm thinking to myself, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just like a giant listing and it's really boring. So that was 0.2% of 2.2 seconds out of like 6 seconds was spent in a function I don't even need to call. So that's a good one. So let's just get rid of that. So that means we can ignore all of this because that's all to that. That branch there doesn't relevant. The next one is my blur function I wrote. So if we look at the blur function, it's running a kernel across this blur. It's running a kernel across an ND array. So all of the stuff here where it's slicing off a kernel and then it's doing this mass on it. Now I know from measuring before that when I run in debug mode and then I run in release mode, that ND array runs 1000 times faster in release mode. So I think that performance problem isn't going to happen in release mode. So I probably should have done my measurement there. Part of the reason why I'm doing this is because I want my debug mode to still run fast. Let's see. So in here we have two problems: scene tree idle and scene tree iteration. So let's have a look at the iteration. So we've got physics is running slow. So if we look here, we can see the wrapper space calls. Oops, I didn't mean to click on that. But the wrapper space, top down tree, the wrapper space here calls the engine to do the physics, and then the physics is doing quaternions and collisions and so on, and that's what's causing this 0.2 slowdown here. This message queue flush, what's that calling? Okay, so it's a simplex noise. Who's getting noise? Is that to do with the rendering? Probably. Okay, so if we just ignore, this is the startup, we got the startup time as being shown. Let's just have a look at a chunk of gameplay time. Filter in by selection. Okay. Is it telling me there's nothing to say? It's like it measured nothing during that time. Okay, let's filter into this. Yeah, there's not enough time spent. Maybe I'm capturing parts of the gameplay where it wasn't actually running for some reason. Like there's a long capture here that's got nothing in it. Okay, so it looks like everything is going to be in that GD native, and the GD native is kind of not relevant. So what we can do at this point is just to run it in release mode. Game dev star factory rs cargo build. Well, run edit configurations. What's the optimize flag you put in cargo? Where do we put that? There's a particular place you put an optimize option in cargo that means it always builds in release. I might look that up real quick. How to get a release build with debug. Ah, there we go. So we'll do this inside of my cargo.toml for SG core. Toml always gives me a bit of a laugh because my name is Tom and my last name is Lees, so Tom L is kind of my name. Thank you for reminding me, Careful Profiles. It's a good reminder. Run edit configurations. Build this. I need to write on the end of this path that I want the release build. Is it? It's target release, isn't it? Apply. Okay. Build. Run. So one thing about running the release build is it's going to take longer to compile. Okay, so it's saying that I can't put that profile here. I need to go down to where my workspace is to find this type. No, that's not it. This TOML file, and I already had that profile. Oh, I see. Thank you again, Careful. Edit configurations and get rid of this word target here. Apply. Okay. Run build. Now, I think that what will happen is that it's going to go to a different place on my hard disk drive. Game dev star factory rust. This is just a random source file that happened to come up in the history. I'm just going to go up a few folders. SG. Now there's a targets folder here, and this is where all the binaries go, and usually they go in debug because I usually build in debug mode, but I'm building in release mode, so it should end up in here. And the reason why that's relevant is because in Godot there's a file. I'm also doing VS Code here because I use that for modifying my Godot files. There's a file that defines where. I need to orient myself, and it's not helping that when I click on things it's jumping around. Okay, I want script, and in script native sim, and in here sgcore.gdnlib. This defines where my targets are, and for my Windows target I need this to be in release so that it's going to find my DLL, because it grabs it directly from the place that I'm building in Rust. So that's building. So the thing I wanted to demonstrate to you early on, if you caught the start of my stream, I moved the little pink dude around, and you notice how I've moved him in open space. But if the actual goal I wanted to solve was that you shouldn't be able to move him in open space. You should stay within the walls of a ship. and then you need to use an earlock and need to have a little spacesuit on, and all the other nice things that I can imagine in my head that aren't coded in the game. And it's one of those difficult things about making games, is that it's trivially easy to imagine stuff and plan it out, and it's a lot harder to actually tell the computer how to do that, and to make it actually happen. So dealing with that stress and that difference is like, and then there's a cognitive load personally of just trying to manage this idea and believe that it's going to be good, that people are going to like it, and I find it very helpful that, you know, there's 50 people here telling, well, you guys will tell me if it's a stupid idea, or people on Discord will tell me. In my Discord, we've got a Discord running, I'm not even in it at the moment, because of the computer crash. We had a blue screen of death when I opened VTune. Okay. Where are we at? So we've got the production floor, and that is a kind of world, and it lives inside the spaceships, and I've modified it recently so that it actually copies out the map of where all the modules are, because the point was that inside the little ship world you're going to have conveyors, and you've got all sorts of stuff moving on those conveyors, and those things moving are complicated to simulate, and so I'm going to do them in a lockstep world where every client with the same starting state will reach the same end state each tick, and so the network only has to see in the start state and any changes you make, actions. But there's like an arcade world, which is a space world, and in the space world we have a lot less complexity, but we have a higher requirement for action. Okay, Carofel. I'll try to say what I'm doing rather than look too much then. The font size is quite big, and it's like a trade-off between big fonts that make your life easy and small fonts that make my life easy, and that makes it hard to find a good balance. Cool, you probably don't have the time to even look. So I'm not actually looking at anything relevant anyway. Everything on my screen right now is just text that's not relevant to what I'm saying. So I'm glad you weren't straining to see it. So we have a space wrapper that is on screen here on the left. I might just get rid of this. So close all in group and file. We'll just pump up the settings a little bit more for anyone who is actually watching the screen. So thanks for letting me know. I appreciate the communication. So we have in the space world, we have these specs components. So each one of these things is a struct that specs knows about. Did this finish? No, it's still going. So here's, for instance, a spaceship. So I'll put that on the right, and then close it here. And so a spaceship tracks its location. And so one thing I've added recently is something called a floor summary. And so this is something that the space world knows about. That is tells us where things are inside of a ship. So there's a module map here, which is a hash map containing a mapping between 2D coordinates in space and particular types of modules. So each production module, if I go into that, is at a particular location, again, same location, faces a certain way, and is of a certain type. So that would be like a flight console or something. So you're going to visualize it. This is like a two-dimensional grid of tiles, and each tile is represented by a particular way of being drawn. So say it's a conveyor corner, storage, walls. There's going to be more later on. Refinery, scoop, manufacturer, constructor, flight console, engine, generator, mining laser, etc. So yeah, I might just get on with the coding and stop trying to explain so much. So I have this concept up here. Source builder. How's this build going? It's finished. Oh, running the game from there is kind of pointless because I change its properties and edit it. Edit with Notepad. I want to make this game launch also release. Wow, there's a lighting problem here. It's really interesting. Okay, so that rebuild normals was actually necessary. So remember how I said I had a performance problem with the rebuild normals call? Yeah, turns out that Godot doesn't like it if I didn't call that. Okay, that's annoying. I'm going to ignore that right now and not worry about the performance problem. Can I actually ignore it? Am I able to ignore it? Because I'm getting stuck on it. The plan is to ignore it, Tom. Okay. So see how that loaded a lot faster, and we've got a frame rate that's reasonable. And if I was to run it in VTune, we'd probably find that we didn't have a bottleneck. There's a little pink guy who starts in the origin, and he starts inside an asteroid, and he's going to come out soon, I imagine. Where are you, my friend? Are you even moving? Oh, I know what's going on. He's server based, so he's probably somewhere far away already. Probably have to find him way out in space. Will I find him? No. The answer is no. Tom will never find this guy. Great demo. Okay, so we got a little pink guy we can't find, he's lost in space. And when we move him, worlds, actions, player input, this is the code where we move him. So when you push the different keys, it actually puts it into something called an actor input and puts it into the actor. I had kind of two things I want to do. One is collision detection on the ships, and the second one I'm going to do first is that when you push the use key, I'd like to allow the player to go into like a flight console. So let's just jump into the actor input, which is this little thing that just holds the list of buttons that are currently being pushed: lateral X, Y, rotation. We'll probably do the moving between different entities here. So let's get cracking on that. Move actor is here. So when the action gets run, it calls this down here. This is a trait implementation of something of executes action, which always calls something called apply and passes in a world, which is a specs world. And here we read out all the bipeds and find the first one, which is kind of temporary code. Yeah. So I want to change this code. First thing I want to change is to I might just think about this in terms of a unit test, because that's probably easier for me to conceptualize than to try and create it in whole cloth with no test and then test it in a functional way, like test it as an integration test. So I was going to jump to spaceship or wrap a space and go to the end. And here's a relevant test. We're just going to grab this test across and I'm going to use it as a skeleton. So in this test we're going to test that the point is when the player pushes the right button, do they move into something called a flight console, which allows them to move the ship, right? So we create a sector. I'm just going to import something, use okay, so we use the prelude. That gives me main things from my library. We create a new sector, create a new world. That's a space world. That's good. We add a spaceship to the space world. We say that the spaceship belongs to this ID 9. That's great. We don't care about a client. That stuff's not relevant. And we leave that alone for now. Okay, and then the next thing we need to do is to build a flight console on the spaceship that we can go and visit. So, and we also need to add a player. So, I think I have a player appears. We'll use a space wrap as way of adding, so we want to add a player. Space, add player. Oh, it's called wrapper space, and it's up here already. So I'm going to put this over here and close all on the right and close others, and that'll help me stay organized. It's really tricky with such a large font to see what's going on. So we'll make space smaller, and we'll go into add player, which is the one I want to call. And so we use space add player, and we need to say where they are and what they're in. So they're in the space world. We're going to say that the X lock is 0. We need to say fix64 from, that's where it is in X. That's where it is in Y. This is where our player is going to be. Their position is relative to this particular ship, like so. Their force ID, I'm just gonna, this whole force ID thing is just like a prototype right now. It doesn't do anything yet, but I made the field, so I'll use it. But you can probably guess what that's for. It's to decide who can control what. So we've got a spaceship. It's a particular location. We've got a person that's standing right in the origin of that ship. And the next thing I wanted to do was to add a building. This is the production floor class. So that's what I was thinking of here. So there's a structure called prod floor, and it has some methods in it. For instance, build, and add module. Here we go. Production floor, build. Build and add module, and to do that it needs a space world, so we'll pass in a mutable reference to the space world. Probably doesn't need to actually be mutable. I need to track that down and remove that, but not right now. Oh great. This is how I get hold of the specs one, is by using these strings. This test is using quite a low level version of my API, which is a bit verbose. So at 0, 0, we're going to build a module facing left, and it's going to be a flight console. Now this entity is special because when the user stands up next to it and pushes a special key, they take control of the ship. I missed a comma here. Okay, so we got that. Now the next thing to do is to create and execute a version of this action. So set player input. So we want to say set player input, and let's have a look at, we've got new, and so right now the inhabits, there's a structure. Let's have a look at this structure. It's a ship pilot. We want it to become a ship pilot later, but right now it's controlling a player avatar. So this is describing to the input system what the client thinks that the player currently controls. So if you have a look at player avatar again, I'll just split this vertically. No, other vertically, the horizontally kind. at the inhabits is up here. Inhabits. It inhabits the ship pilot, ship module, ship avatar, player avatar. So for the player avatar, we want a specific world, which is yeah, it's exactly the stuff which is in the avatar. So that avatar is at this location. Well, that makes things really easy, doesn't it? So the client tells the server where it thinks the player is at the time it does the action. That was a good bit of design on my part. Obviously the server needs to make sure that the player isn't lying, because the client might just maliciously be cheating and write a bad version of this action when it sends over the network. So these actions are the main means of communication between server and client. So the client creates an action, sends it to the server. Both the server and client at the same time apply the same action to the same world, should end up with the same result. And every other player on the network receives the action from the server and also applies it at the same time. And time here is based on ticks. So when the server applies a tick to the world as a different time on your wall clock than when the player does it. This is what lockstep is about, lockstep multiplayer. What we're going for is something which is like what Overwatch did. There's this great video on YouTube, Overwatch, this one here, and I'll just get rid of the time, but and there's a great diagram in it as well. It's this one here. So it's just
because the client is always gobbling up player input as fast as it possibly can, or as close to now as it possibly can based on your latency. If it has to wait to consume input, it will result in slower server response time to your input, and that makes... Anyway,
so we absolutely adore YouTube for learning stuff, and if you're interested in multiplayer, I seriously recommend you watch that video. Anyway, don't have to do it now, you can wait till I'm done, right? But put it in your to-watch list. Nah, do what you want. If you do go, this is the RecallSingularity. Search me on Twitter or other places. Self-promotion, it always feels just as bad. Anyway, we need to put this data about where the player is inside this. And we need to tell this constructor. So this is called world ID. This one's called X lock. This one's called Y lock. And when I save it, it'll all format? No. It's all a bit tricky with such a large font size to make everything fit. There we are. And it's all red probably because C-line hasn't caught up. Oh, it's just reminded me that I need to also specify a second thing, which is probably the input that was given. Inhabits and input, which is a player input class. Have a look at the player input class, it's quite involved. We might make a new function for testing. We'll just call it just button or new with button, and we'll simplify it. So new with button, it takes a button mask and it returns a self. So this is like a special version of new, and what it does is let input equal default, and then whoops, player input, no, that's not quite right, input dot button state equals button input dot button change equals button, which means that the button just got pressed down, like it's like on button down is that particular configuration. And finally we need to return input, and this needs to be mutable, mute, and so that will create a version of this input. So this is where we capture the controller, and button mask is up here. It's just these different buttons you could push. So the one we care about is this button primary. So in here we're going to specify that it was a player input where they pushed button, newest button, they pushed that button, like so. Did I mess this up? Newest button shouldn't take self, it's static. Great. Why is this unhappy? Is this here in player? Yes. Oh, I forgot to add an import here at the start of my tests, which says use super star, which means that all those different symbols that are defined outside of this block are pulled in as well, like button primary. So this should cause the button to be pressed, and then we should be able to check on something. So the thing we should check on is what is inhabited. How did I do inhabiting? I'm not sure if I made a class for it yet. I certainly thought about doing one. Let's just get rid of this window so we've got more space. And yeah, I don't think we've done any sort of player inhabiting of entities. Hold on. So let's just quickly set that up. We got player input. Is it the one that has the component for? No, and we've got actor input, which is this one. So actor input is like if you got a ship and someone sends a console and says turn left, then the actor input of the ship says, okay, I've been told to turn left, and then the physics or engine simulation says, okay, we're currently turning left, let's apply these forces. So these are like three different systems, so I don't really care. By the time I get to the physics and the engines, I don't really care who told me to turn left, if it's an AI or if it's a human. But that's what this is allowing. So I need something else that's going to track somebody controlling a ship, so I know that nobody else is allowed to do it. I was wondering if I want to have multiple. Yeah, I'm going to have add to drive, I think, or something similar. Or does the player inhabit? I'm just trying to plan in my head how I want the components to work. We just start with some basic ones, and we'll see how it pans out. So driver inhabit. So let's have the concept that somebody could be driving a ship. Who's driving the ship? Actor. Okay, so I've just noticed out in the lounge that my little robotic vacuum cleaner that's faithfully been vacuuming has just completed. So I'm just going to type this up real quick, and then I'm going to have a like 2-minute break while I open the door, turn on the air conditioning in the lounge, which blows in here, and then I'll get some cold air, which will be so much better. Oh my god, I'm sweating my ass off over here. It's so hot. Driver inhabit. These two screens, well, they're great. They're both like 150 watt heaters. So this is going to be, well, it's going to be so small, it's not even worth putting in a dense vector. Like, when you're considering what kind of storage, this is going to be a vector that's as large as there are entities. But this is only 2 ints, so it's like in an array of 2 ints. It's not worth doing anything here to make it more dense, is it? Well, I kind of feel like we should use a hash map store for that. I don't really care. The memory trade-off is not worth it. So in driver inhabit, I think that's all we need to have. Okay. How does this going to work? And then I wonder if we're going to point both ways. So whether we make it so that a player has a particular entity on them. Do we have the idea of a player having an entity? We got a biped. I don't think I've got any idea of the player and what they're inhabiting outside of this entity that I just showed you. Yeah, we'll build this part by part. This stuff's like, it's mind-blowing how complicated it gets when you start thinking about it. Space. Yep, I'm going to go and do that air conditioning. I'll be back in, I'll just write this up on a notepad real quick. Back in 2 minutes. I'm just going to walk out, open the door, turn on the aircon. I'll be right back. Okay, there we go. Thank you for sticking with me through that. Everything's going, I think. Yep, still got some sound. Good to see. I'll just clip this little clipper thing on my shirt. This is getting much more comfortable. I like it. It was not as hot in my out there as it is in my office anyway, so as soon as I open the door, yeah, so nice. I probably should face this right at me. I'll turn that off in a minute and you'll be able to hear me better. I'm just looking at my sound meter to see how loud the fan is. Actually, the fan isn't too loud on the microphone, it seems. Okay. It's only on for 1 minute. Just hold on. So, that's so good. Okay. Player inhabits. So the thing I want to check for is to see if that actor input gets created. This player inhabit, driver inhabit. Do I make a driver inhabit with multiple parts? Like, we might have a driver and then we have a gunner, or we have gunners for each gun. I don't know, we'll figure that out. Okay. Oh, gunners. Oh, that sounds interesting. Oh yes, well, I'll give this RecallSingularity a look. Oh, it's really interesting. It's got factories and guns and set player input new. So being created by world packets. Yeah, so that testing is kind of irrelevant. The part that I care about here is I need to get space and look at the read storage. So we create this action and we're going to apply it. This apply is what actually makes it happen. And we're applying it to the space world. Just turning off the fan, hold on. We apply it to the space world. Here, that makes the action do its thing. I think I might need to say it's a mutable reference, or I probably need to keep doing this piece of... I probably should make a variable for this. So let's just make a variable here. And let world equal that. and then here we add a spaceship, here we add a player, and here we add a module. That was actually getting the wrong world. It needs to get this world ID 9. So the way this is set up, I'm going to have to get it a second time here. Get world. Get world. And I've got a lot of places where I'm passing in a mutable world where I need to be passing in a non-mutable one, because the specs world doesn't have to be mutable for you to actually change stuff inside of it. It's kind of like a cell in that way. So I don't take advantage of that, but mostly because I didn't realize how much you could do. I'm not sure if it's because the world changed since I started using it, like the version of specs when I first started, and to now it's changed it, but it's probably because I just didn't know. Yeah. So this is to get the internal ship world and place a flight console in it. I need this. Oh, and that reminds me that in order for this to make its way out into the space where it can be seen, I need to call a particular function in space, in the sector. So I might just call perform specific tick and do one tick, because it does something specifically. If we go in here, it calls this thing called copy from ships, and so copy from ships does a bunch of working. But what it should be doing specifically is it should be taking, and I haven't got a unit test that makes sure that works, so we're going to find out if it works in a second. Hey, Corn Forever. Yes, this is Godot game scripted in Rust. That's correct. And it's more than script, like all the state is in pure Rust. So if you just search up for gorgeous Godot games in Rust, if you search for RecallSingularity, that's me. There's a Singularity recall in Asheron's call. Oh, okay. That's me. This is me. That's not me. This is me. That's not me. This is me. That's me. And that's me. So I can live with that. Gorgeous Godot games in Rust. In fact, if you just search for Godot in Rust, I think you get me a few times as well. Yep, that's the bindings I use. That's me. I'm not sure where that came from. That's not me, sorry. That's me, that's me. No, someone else is in there. Anyway, there's a few. This guy used my tutorial. This is actually a great little open source example of making a 2D game with Rust scripting. And there's a 3D one as well, SSCG. And Karofel made the library that I'm using. At least he's a major part of it, so I appreciate that. And I have a whole Discord server. Come join us, where and there's links to the Discord server from that article. But if you jump in here, I might just write in here 61 viewers. Thanks for coming to watch. Yeah. Okay, nice typos, man. Viewers. I'll just drop an invite in here for you guys to use. Invite people. Copy. Well, you know, it's still a contribution, Karofel. It's still a contribution. Yeah, I know Toasties is doing a great job, but I mean, you know, you're part of the project. So, public face is important. Delicious AC coming this way. Okay. So, we want to be able to read the spaceship to know, but we're not interested in the spaceship, actually we're interested in this driver inhabit. We should find, so what do we want to do? We want to get a particular ship and a particular driver in the same place. So okay, let's do it this way. So let drivers ships equal space dot, this is a specs call I'm doing here, system data. So this is the space world I should be passing in here. Let's call it space world. Space. All this talking makes me burp a lot. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, space system data spaceship. Now, what this will do is it will return two different things. What's it returning? It's returning a read. Actually, no, sorry, I'm putting the type in the wrong place. Here, the type is a read storage, which holds a driver inhibit. And over here we want a read storage which holds a spaceship. And to do that we just say I want system data, like so. Oh, I shouldn't have a take reference. Okay. And then I say, how do we find this guy? Okay, so if we take the two of these things, we take a reference to drivers, and we take is it a reference? Looking for the optional. There's an optional question mark thing you can do. I think it's a question mark and a comma, or is it a comma then a question mark? There's a way you can ask for things to be optional in specs, or is it we put some? Okay, I'm going to go to the specs tutorial to remind myself how to do this, because I haven't done it for a while. I'm looking to create an optional, a join over an optional optional class. I need to look at the book. And joining components. Optional components. Oh yeah, so we use this dot maybe. Okay. So So this is you take a reference to it and then you use dot maybe. So in this case we want oh, wonderful. Corn Forever, you're going to want to know that there's a tutorial on making roguelike games. This one here. This tutorial covers. I find it very useful myself, Corn. And if you make this roguelike and you have a game state and then you want to mirror it to Rust, it's not too hard. Sorry, to Godot. And I have another article in my list of stories. Rendering a 2D game in 3D. And this is talking about how my game's kind of 2D and it started off looking like this, and then I rendered assets out of Blender, it looked like that, and then went on to make it fully 3D. But some of the concepts around taking a game state and mirroring it into Godot is mentioned in that article, so hopefully you find that useful. Okay, ships dot maybe. So, actually I put the maybe in the wrong place. So what I want to do is, I know there's going to be a ship because I just created it, but I want to know if there's a driver. That's what we're testing for. So we get those, we join on that, and then we collect them into a vector. So and we need to actually clone those. So map, and it gives me a pair. I want to call pair dot clone. It's probably a fast way of doing that. Map, and it's let ship drivers equal this, and ship drivers is going to be a vec of something, right? I don't really care what kind of vec it is right now. And then down here we can check this by going, we put ship drivers in, do a debug print, and what we should see is a list with one spaceship in it and a driver. What we'll probably see is a list with one spaceship and no driver. So let's just run a test for the simulation. Now up here I haven't actually put in use specs prelude star, which is needed for that join I put in there. Let's close all these and have a look at the compile errors. So it doesn't know what a driver inhabit is, which isn't surprising, and the reason for that is because I added it straight in actor input. Now it's probably going to be very confusing to have this in its own file, so we'll go back into mod and we'll make a module called mod inhabit, right, and then Alt enter on this, create a module for it, add driver inhabit, and then this is going to require use yeah, I could probably do direct to stats on the data. Yeah. Part of the reason why is because it gives me some visibility in the error into what's going on beyond the visibility I'm going to get. But the disadvantage is that if I add fields, it'll break later. It's partially to be lazy, and it's partially to see what's going wrong when things go wrong. Because in the case of asserting on the size, then you assert on the size, then you insert on the data, and you end up with lots of tests. And if one of them fails, it doesn't give you a full picture. It just tells you that one thing's wrong. Snapshot testing. Maybe. I would usually call it golden data. There's a create insta. Yeah, but my systems aren't so complicated that I probably need all this stuff. Insta Rust. Okay, well that's something fun to read about later. Thank you for mentioning it. I'll have a look at it later on. I better bring the stream to summary back up so I can see that there's 61 people watching. Oh my god, thank you for watching. So we need our own prelude, which will make all these red things go away. Okay, I wrote a prelude because I was getting sick of importing things, and it was making it difficult to refactor my code, because all my different libraries would constantly, like if I was to move any source around, all my use statements would break. So I made my own prelude, and then all I have to do was change the prelude, and then every single one of my modules has a statement like this, like it brings in all the mods, and then it only exposes those symbols I want exposed. Anything exposed in here gets exposed through the prelude. This is me being a bit lazy maybe, and I don't know how much I'm abusing the use system, but it works for me at the moment. Driver inhabit entity, great. So back here, got inhabit, and I want to say pub use inhabit, driver inhabit. So now that's exposed to through my prelude. Because it's exposed to my prelude, it's exposed to everybody. And I've just realized I need to add something somewhere else, which is to the space wrapper. That's right, it's called wrapper space. And there's a function in here called build, and it registers all the different things, and it needs to know that there's now a new component. Great. So go back to actor input. Nope. Well, if I run the compiler again, we'll see what the errors are. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too, Carofel. The disadvantage is that it can create false negatives. So yeah, you can false positives. I mean, you can have tests that fail because I add a field to something, and therefore the string output is changed, and it's just going to confuse things a whole lot. Deprecated. I need to solve these deprecated random items. It's just duplicated my errors. I have some of my errors show up twice. Type annotations needed. It's funny I can't figure out that it's a player input since I return it here. But hey, okay. So instead of default we use player input default, and that will fix that problem. Thanks, Carofel. It was good that you dropped by. Thanks for all the chatting, and have a good night. Sleep well. Mismatch types. New world ID. Okay, yeah, because I think in the action it doesn't pass the full world ID, it passes what's called a local ID. I added some function that changed between the two. Use global ID to local. This is to do with my networking and just trying to remind myself not to use a 32-bit number when I don't need one. But it might. We'll see if I end up sticking to it. Having a global ID that the server knows about, and then having a local ID specific to each communication with a particular client, and then doing a remap on transmit and receive all the time. It has security advantages. We'll see if I follow through on that. Apply. So I was originally thinking this would be a massively multiplayer online game, but I've since decided that I'm probably going to make it more like a game, like the games I'm basing it on, where you can download a full game and play offline or play with friends, you know, on a server or a LAN or something, which has many advantages. And that's the current thought anyway. Expects a world, found world sync, yeah. So space world here, I just need to use the word space. Probably going to end up with an issue because space here is essentially mutable, and if it lives past this point here, the borrow check is going to point out to me that I'm getting two mutable things from my sector. I'm borrowing sector twice. We'll see. We've got a problem with join. We should have got join from the prelude. What have I missed? Drivers. I might need to put this in brackets like in the example. Okay, so saying that I forgot to put in driver inhabit. So we go here. I forgot to derive everything that I would want to derive. So let's just grab all these derives here and dump them on top of player inhabit. This is Rust helping us by creating a bunch of functions automatically or automagically from our structure definition. South American friend. No, I'm not sharing my source on GitHub. This is a closed source application. However, I'm willing to share parts of what I'm working on, and I put some key parts on examples. But the bindings between Rust and Godot are open source. By the way, that's an in-joke from earlier in the stream. I'm actually from New Zealand, but for some reason Dan Monix Daaknokx, I know that's not how you pronounce it, but I'm just trying to be silly. The trait bound. Okay, it's just saying there's no default value for an entity, so I can't say default. And I can't say serialize and deserialize, which is all fine, I don't mind. So there we are, it's pointing out the mutable borrow that I was concerned about. It's a pretty easy one to fix. I just need to take this let line here. Well, I mean, I could be really concrete about it and put it in a block. You'd have to do this in an older version of Rust anyway. I kind of like it because it makes it really obvious what I'm doing. So this variable here dies at the end of this block, and then I go down a bit further to where I need space again, which is about here, and I just pull it out. Hello, X in blank, nice to meet you. Thanks for dropping by. I'm making the RecallSingularity. It's a factory game in space. At the moment I'm worrying about how to manage a player so that when they walk up to something called a flight console, it's a particular structure, it lets them take control of the ship. So I'm writing a unit test to manage that. It's mutable here. It's mutable there, 181. Yeah. Am I using the word space world further down? Yeah, I am. I'm using it again here. So it's just reminding me that I need to actually say here sector dot get or create world. So my evil plan to use blocks didn't work. I need to. It's a bit of a tricky one to explain out loud, but it's pretty obvious to me what that means. I need to go through and fix some of these things. I don't think we even used this function yet, it was just an idea. Well, something somewhere is locked up. Lots of failed tests. Some of these failed tests are because of my asteroid generation code. Oh, I probably should take out that that test I put in. Remember how I showed you that the space was full of asteroids? The reason why is because for testing purposes, in my build function, I added a make space full of asteroids line here. So I'm just going to get rid of that. And then the tests will run, one, a lot faster, and two, a lot of the ones were failing is because that was there. Okay, that's better. So in player input, the tests are okay. So it's to do with fetching a resource. Which one did I fetch? I need to update my libraries. I'm pretty sure that the specs problem has been fixed now. Where did it happen though? It's trying to get actor input biped and actor input here. Which implies that one of those two is not already registered in the space world. Which is really odd, because I thought they were. Here's biped, and here's the actor input. So did the space world not get created properly? So here we are, we get the spaceship wrapper and call build a bit further down. So yeah, I don't see why that would happen. Oh, I do now. So see here where I get space. Here I am, this line is getting the version of my world which is in space, but that new world ID that's mentioned here is actually inside the spaceship. It's not space, which is space world ID. So I was actually getting the wrong world, and so this exception is completely right because I got the world that wasn't the space world and it's missing some key components. I wonder if I should try and write this test using my new, I've got a new API for writing tests. It's a lot less verbose than this, a lot simpler to read. It's funny how I wanted to expedite things on stream by not using it, but it's just made things harder to understand. So I didn't know what to expect, but what I actually got was, we have a spaceship, here's a description of a spaceship, and it's controlled by nobody. So the thing that's wrong, the first thing that's wrong is we should be able to assert equal that this is going to be not nothing, it's going to be some, and the thing it's going to be is an entity. So we should see a driver inhabit, and what it's inhabiting is an entity driver, and its entity is going to be the ship's entity. So I need to say entity here, and here I need to say entities, and I think I put a ampersand before that like this, and then this will mean that when I get my ship drivers I can say, this is where Karoffa was going before, assert equal len, so we're looking for this to be of length 1, len, and then we should let I'll just copy this because I'm too lazy to type it in again. I would call this TITIS entities, and then over here I need to put in here that I've got a reference to entities. So actually I shouldn't put ampersand there, that's right. So let that equal ship driver 0, so that's like unpacking the components the join statement gave us. And then here the driver should be equal to the entity, and I should find that in to be equal to driver. The driver ship entity. And then this, so we might just print this for my own benefit for now, like this, and I'm going to remove that specific test. So if I run it again, so it's saying that we don't get an option containing the driver inhabit, we get an option containing a reference to the driver inhabit. So that's fine, let's put a reference here. So I might switch from running all tests to, because I'm in C-line, I can actually just click on this and say run that one test, and then we'll have a less complicated output. Okay, so we expected to find a driver inhabit, we didn't find one. So after quite a lot of coding, I've got a failing unit test, which is the Oh, are you looking at this? Yes. Always good to have my obs stream on stream. And on the left we have I'm streaming, me streaming, me streaming. So I've got I do something here, and then you see it later on over there, which is when you see it. So it's very interesting. Anyway, streamerception, I like it. Wonder how we could. I mean, it's always fun to make this, to go into here, to make that full screen, and then to like go, you know, wow. Wow, that's really trippy. Is it looping it because it was full screen? That was so crazy. I'm not quite sure exactly what that was. Oh, now I understand what's going on. That was actually streamception. So if I put this here and I make it. Oh, are you hearing my voice multiple times? No, it's muted. If I make this full screen now, right, and then I update and see that the stream inside, and then I update and see the stream inside that, and then I update and see the stream inside that. So this is just, and we're probably losing quality as we go. Every time it's like restreaming itself. So what I'm seeing now is a stream of a stream of a stream of a stream. You see how the quality is degrading as we go on? This is actually ancient past stream that you see in the background here. You can see my mouse cursors, how many mouse cursors we've got. This is some trippy stuff, man. I couldn't figure out what was going on the first time. It's like one of those dance videos. Anyway, that was just too cool. That was a pixel, the cursor dance. Okay. Player input, stream of a stream. That's streamception. I love it. So we've now narrowed down a test that shows us exactly what we want to see. We want a behavior that when the person pushes the use key, that they take control of the ship. So in here, we want to do exactly that. So if inside the player input, set player input class, we have access to variables, what the player currently inhabits and its input. So if self dot inhabits, so we could say match self dot inhabits like this, and then I can just push Alt Enter on this and it fills the match arms for me. So we could currently be a ship pilot, controlling a ship module, or a player avatar, right? Now I'm not sure why this is blowing up on me. Oh, it's because we need to return an entity. So let's just say none. This function always returns no entity, which isn't what we're going to do in the end, but I just want to get rid of the error. So if we're currently a ship pilot, then if self.input.pressed, and we're looking for the back button. So if the person presses the back button at this point, we want to exit the ship. So how do we exit the ship at the moment? Need to find the ship. So if you're a ship pilot, you inhabit a particular world ID, right? How do we do this search? So inhabit a world ID. Anyway, I'm going to say here, exit the ship. So until I fill this match arm, it's not going to be possible to get out of a ship, right? But the one I'm most interested in here is player avatar. So the player is standing around. So the player is in these places: world ID, an X lock and a Y lock. And later on, we're going to care what the X and Y lock are. But at the moment, we only care about the world ID. So player ID, world ID, and then comma dot dot to say we don't unpack anything else from that structure. And if you're a player avatar standing in a world, let's just say that we immediately inhabit that world. So in order to find the world, let's do a linear search through all the ships. So this test does half of the job. Actually, it does most of the job. So let's grab this join. Right. We've got problems here because I haven't imported the prelude. Use super. No, use crate. Prelude. Star. And then I should be able to get rid of all of this. Yeah. So we get driver ships entities from system data, and the next thing we do is we say if we have drivers, ships, and entities like so, we need to do something very similar to what's here. So we want to go through all the drivers, ships, and entities. So let target ship equal this. Page down. I'm losing my spot now because I pushed the wrong button. We filter these. So what we're interested in is we want the one where the ship has the right world ID. Ship and ship.world ID is equal to world ID. Right, so we want we want to find the situation where there's a ship which represents a particular world. This is how we identify which ship the player's in and so on. And of those we want the first one. Great. Now, if you track down our iterator's work, you'll find out that first is going to return an option. So we either have a ship or we don't have a target ship. So if let sum and it's going to equal the option, right? And then in here we're going to unpack a optional driver, a ship, and an entity. So it's possible that the ship already has a driver. So if op driver is none, well, we could say, yeah, so if the driver is none, we can take control. Okay, I'm just thinking we might do this a different way. So rather than saying drivers.maybe, we're going to use something called entity. We have to use a mutable reference to drivers here because we're going to change it. So up here we need to say that this is a write storage. Okay, we're going to change drivers and we're going to call this entry, which is similar to I think it's called entries. Yeah, it's entries. And then I'm going to use something called or insert with. So and that reminds me that I can jump back across to our driver. So I'm going to close everything else, close others, and I'm going to open something called driver inhabits. So for those people who are joining, we're currently writing some Rust specs code that is managing when a player pushes a button that they take control of a spaceship by creating this thing in inhabit, creates one of these inhabit entities. I want to be able to have a default version of this, so I'm going to impl default for driver inhabit, which only needs one little method that tells us what a default is. Implement members, and I've realized that this needs to be an option because you might have, I was thinking later we might have multiple drivers. Well, yeah, do I want it to be an option? Let's just stay with it being an option for now. So I'm still straining myself to figure out, no, actually I'm not going to do the option, and because I'm not going to do the option, I don't need a default. And we go back to here. Yeah, let's do it the traditional way. So we'll say this is maybe. Okay, so if the optional driver is none, that's great. So we're going to take our drivers, we're going to insert an entity, and what we're going to insert, I need the specs documentation real quick, or I just want to be reminded which one comes first, the class. Yeah, so here's how you do it. You go to write entity, write storage, insert. This is the entity, and then you have the class. So that's, I had it around the right way. So at entity, we're going to insert a driver, inhabit. Entity of the driver. The driver is going to be entity. Oh, but that entity there is not the player entity. The entity there is the ship entity. We're telling the ship that it has a driver, and the ship's driver is. So yeah, that's not what I want. I want the driver to be the player's entity. But that's all very confusing because we haven't. I don't think we've put in here. So I'm just starting to click that in my system I don't have anything that represents the human themselves that we can refer back to. So we need something that's like a player ID, which I haven't got yet because I need to create some system that tracks the clients. We already have a system that tracks the clients. It's in sector. And it has a list of clients here, client ID, and to this thing called a sector client. How do we manage this later on? Because I want to be able to have things, stuff which is AI. It's just, this stuff will hurt my brain. It hurts my brain too much. Okay, so in player input, we need to have an action, and the player input needs to have all the things it currently has, but it also needs to say which character we're talking about. Like, is it you? You're a person in the game, right? You've joined, and then there's me, and I've joined, and they're both in the server together. And so we need something that represents that it's you, or that's me, and that it's you inhabiting a ship, or me inhabiting a ship. So when you create a player, like here, add a player, when they've joined, they need something else that represents them, whether that's an entity in specs or whether it's in another hash map. Feels like it should be a client ID in a resource. Yeah. Let's go about it that way. So we need a client list. New. Okay. Which is again another resource. So creating a hash map of client IDs. I can't think of any data I want to store against a client ID right this second, but I'm sure I'll come up with it later. And to register, and I also need to implement default for this. So let's pop a derive instruction above from earlier in the clipboard. Default debug copy clone equal partially crawl serialize deserialize. We don't need to serialize and deserialize here. Default debug copy clone, yeah, we can live with those. So we have a hash map of these things. So wrapper space is here. So when we create a new space wrapper, surprised how few of the people who are online are here. I'm just going to tell some of my regulars I'm streaming because I don't see them on the stream. Where constructor. Who else is missing? This is a public Discord, by the way. If you're interested in joining it, I'll just drop another invite here and here. But this is the RecallSingularity. If you start searching, you'll find it pretty quickly. And if you're interested in what I'm making, there's a lot more detail there. Making a space factory game. Cool. So I'm just adding this. Wrapper space. Client list. Hello, Weird Constructor. Good morning. Nice to see you. We've got 93 viewers. That's what you get if you stream during the day, not late at night. Client list default. So just doing this player, I'm just doing this player input stuff. So when the player pushes their button, they get moved into a spaceship. And I'm realizing that my driver is no longer going to be. Is the driver still going to be an entity? At the moment, the driver is going to be a client ID, so we're just going to leave it like that. Inhabits. So in here, I'm going to change it from being an entity to being a client ID. I might have an enumerator here later on, so that I can have AIs flying ships or something. All this stuff can be refactored later. I just had to keep reminding myself that I can get it wrong to start off with. Yeah, I thought, well, I was doing my morning work anyway, I might as well stream it when everyone's awake. This is actually like one of those tasks that's probably, it's been intimidating me a lot, like the interaction between space and the ship world, but I've kind of cracked it by copying a map across of what the ship has in it. And I'm cracking it further at the moment by just keeping it really simple. So if you're standing in a ship and you push a button, then you can take control of the ship. So here, so this driver is going to be our client ID now. So how do we know our client ID? Well, this action needs to specify a client ID. And here it does. Wonderful. So I can actually use, in here I'm probably going to always want the client ID. So let ID equal self.input. I'm pretty sure it's that, but the suggestion isn't getting it right. Oh, I called it player ID, that's why it's not finding it. Good. Okay. I'll just call it player ID to be consistent over here then. So when we make a driver, it has to contain the player ID here, like so. Which is good. And I think there's kind of, oh, and then the last part here is that we want to return that as our value. So at the point where you're flying a ship, you return ship entity. Great. So if we're trying to figure out what our inhabited entity is for this particular action, if you currently inhabit a player in avatar, okay, I need to check that the person's pressing the button. Okay, if you're currently inside a ship, where did I check the button press? Ah, here's the button press check, and it wasn't. Okay, so we just say if you're in here and you're pressing the primary button, like so, then we're going to need to figure out, it's gone orange because I've got my curly braces wrong. Don't worry about that too much right this second. Indent that, and then put a curly brace here, and it will be happy again. It's just recompiling. So if you're pushing a button, we list all the ships, we find the first one which matches the world ID that the player is currently standing in. We check if that target ship has no driver, and if it does, we make the player the driver. And the player now inhabits that ship. Okay, and that kind of implies that the first thing that the client information needs to contain is one of these inhabit structures. So up here we've got this idea of what does the player inhabit. So you remember over here we have this client list. So we have a client detail. And what they inhabit. What does that client inhabit? Well, one of these inhabits enumerators that I showed you a second ago, they're in a spaceship or something. So this is a hash map of client IDs to client details. What do they inhabit is here. And then they're going to have a state, like whether they're online or offline and so on. So in our action of player input, we're going to need to move them to the correct resource. How do we do that? That sounds suspiciously like something that you send via an action or an event of some kind. I have this list of events that I send out, and yeah, if I have a look in sector, process message, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit stressed out about all the potential for how this change ripples through the system. But the truth is, to pass this specific test, I don't need to ripple that through the system. I can make that as a separate decision. So I can say here that the driver goes to there, and then we need to update the client list. I mean, to update it right now, we can just go world.fetch and say with our turbofish that we want to fetch the client list here, one of those. We want to fetch this guy, and then with the client list we want to update. We want to get that particular client. client ID or player ID. Let's just say we do it with an entry. Once we have the player ID, we want to say let me just quickly look at the documentation for HashMap. And in here there's something called entries, entry, and it returns this entry thing. It's a way of handling keys that are missing. You use or insert like this. Let's see what's missing. Yeah, there's an or I should have muted for that, sorry guys. Yeah, we'll use or insert with. Yeah, I kind of know that caraffle, but I guess I like typing. So if the player doesn't already exist, we're going to insert a default one and let equal this. So that should give us a reference to a client info that we can change. And then the next thing we're going to do is say we're going to change where that client is. So normally in this case we should be able to expect that the player is always exists, but because I'm just being a bit defensive here, I'm going to say it doesn't exist. But if it doesn't exist, it's kind of an error. Sorry, caraffle. When I'm on stream, I get a bit kind of in the headlights, and I'm trying to go fast, which means I make a lot of mistakes. But I still find that overall it helps my productivity because it keeps me on track. I'm not, for instance, reading Reddit right now, so I appreciate you guys kind of just staring at me, so that I'm like, I must keep coding. Anyway, but it does mean I have to fit everything in this tiny little window, and oh my god, it's so horrible. In fact, I might just get rid of this and start using multiple windows again. So split vertically. Usually I work on the left, but I'll work on the right for now. So where were we? We now know the client inhabits, and they are now a ship pilot, like so. And the ship they're piloting is going to be this ship. But we don't store that, we store the world ID. Given the way this works, client list, I'd quite like it to be have the entity it inhabits here. It's just useful. So we'll say it inhabits the entity, and we'll say what is the entity here. But it's optional, it might not inhabit one yet, so let's put an option around that. It might be that we can't derive default for these things. We'll have to find out. Always watching. Did you go away and come back, caraffle? Yes, you did. You couldn't resist. What have I not imported? It's probably because the I know it's wrong. I need to say the name of the enumerator, which is right here at the top of the file. So now that client is now a ship pilot. We return the ship entity. Oh, we need to also say dot let's call it entity is equal to some ship entity. Great. So now we know that the client controls that ship. So that then tells me that I can just say client info entity here. I'm just thinking I don't even need this here. I could actually put it up here like this. And then there's another degree to which we wonder if we trust the client. Do we trust the client here and just assume they inhabit what they claim? Because we could, if we are inserting here, we could actually immediately update inhabits to match what the client says they inhabit in the action, but I don't particularly want to do that. So we don't just say that we return. So here we can just return client info.entity. So in Rust, the very last line in the file, if it doesn't have a semicolon, it becomes a return value. So by putting this here, I'm essentially returning it. So if it has no driver, we change ourselves to the driver. That's great. You probably need to tell the client somehow that their inhabit has changed so they can send the right action next time. This whole chain of events is not well defined. Now, I think we've done enough that the test is going to pass. So Rust doesn't have things like classes. You kind of need to pull yourself back to kind of see things. If you wanted to create a C++ basic class with no virtual stuff, then the way you'd go about doing it is by see if we can find what's a basic class that I have. So it's not an asteroid though, it's something else. Like GS asteroid, this has got a bunch of other junk in it because it's talking to Godot, but it's a structure is defined here with members like so, and then we say we want to implement that structure. We start adding functions to it, right, like this. So you could kind of see this as being the header file defining the structure, and then this being the definitions which you normally put in the CPP file of what the structure can do. But it's a lot richer than that. So for instance, we can actually put multiple places, we can put implementations for things. So I could implement asteroid again, a second block of it down here. But where it gets interesting is in classes like player input. So in player input, I've defined something called a trait. So let's have a look at an action trait. Here's a player input, it's a structure. And then here I implement a couple of functions for that structure. Not sure why I made it a component, now that I think about it. I wonder if I ever register it as a component. I don't think I do. Let's just get rid of this because that's extra code we don't want. And then down here I make some methods on it. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good way of explaining it, Caraffle. But there is some magic in the import block. So if I put an ampersand self here, I say that this is like a member function that doesn't modify stuff. And then down here there's something called a trait, which is kind of like a C++ interface, called set player input. No, I am sorry, I have just confused myself and clicked on the wrong thing. Implement executes action. That is a trait, and it's going to implement it for this. And to do it, it has to bring in certain things. So executes action as a trait has to define something called undo data and define the bodies of two functions, apply and reverse. And then down here I've got a bunch of things that work using executes action. So here is a generic, there's a particular name for this, I can't remember what it is, but I think it's called generic, but it's a function that can take anything that just happens to be an executes action and do something with it. And this is it also contains a list. There's a list somewhere of act dones, which are things that have been executed recently, and that sort of thing. And then I have an enumerator of all the possible actions you might have, and this is what gets sent over the network, you see. So that's how my actions are done. Yeah. But I suggest you read the Rust book. It's kind of mind-bending. If you just start with what you've got as your basic assumption of you create a struct and then you create an implementable block and you create member functions, you'll go a long way with that. But it gets more interesting as you go along. Oh, when you decide to learn Rust, you're going to read the Rust book. That is pretty much the best way to learn it, and you will learn about things like traits and stuff in here. I suggest you read the start of it, and then once you start finding your eyes glazing over, you start working on a project of your own. Hopefully before they glaze over, and just read the book in the background to deepen your understanding as you go. That's how I learn anyway. You can't do copy because inhabits doesn't have copy. Yeah, let's fix that. Inhabits should have copy. I don't think I implement default for it either. Let's just say the default is you have an avatar at 0, 0. So I could just say impl default for inhabits, and then in here I have to implement particular things. I have to implement a function called default that returns and inhabits. So here I'm going to build one and say if you have no other setup, we're going to inhabit so we'll say you're in the star space world ID, and your xlock is fix64. Let's just get rid of this for a minute. From float 0.0. You know, I'm finding streaming quite addictive, and part of the reason why is that the longer I stream, the more people end up watching. You guys seem to get stuck here, which is great. I love it. Thank you for doing that. Oh, I've lost a curly brace. And so it's very hard to stop because as soon as I stop, everyone's gone. It's like, my audience. Okay. Why is it not happy? I see. If I go to space world ID, I scroll down slightly. There's a temp global world ID to local. I can just see myself finally giving in and not bothering with this difference between local and so on. Yeah, I know I can do that. I can, like, dump them on somebody. I love it when people raid me. So, okay. Let's continue working through these errors. It's so nice how, like, if you forget what you're up to, you just, like, run the compiler, it'll remind you. Okay, so client list isn't exposed. So let's try and figure out why that is. It's probably pretty straightforward. Let's check as pub. No, these have to be pub. And I'm treating this one as being pub. I'm treating all these as being pub as well. I think that's probably the right approach for what I'm trying to do right now. It's just to allow people to view right into that stuff. And our module file is here. We need to say pub use. Okay, so we don't have a copy of the world. It's actually called world, not space. Target ship. I can't find value entity. I call it ship entity, I think. Great. Entity missing is not found in this scope. And that's okay. It's one of our use statements that I commented out up here. But this is just saying you control the first biped you find, which is not what I want. We want to say let control entity. We're going to equal this one that we just put up here. Check inhabited. Oh, it's self, that's right. There we go, like so. And it needs a world, which we'll pass in. Excellent. And then we move the controlled entity if there is one. Oh, yes, so we still need this if statement. This is just my way of unwrapping this option. So we get that we might as well just make this, move this to here. So if check inhabited entity returns an entity, then we pop it out, otherwise we return entity missing. This is my way of mapping it to an error. There's probably a really elegant way of doing this using question mark or similar. I need to learn what that is, but I can't be bothered right now. Ruffle might enlighten me in a second. We're going to move it. Oh, when we move the actor. Okay, so it was saying that once we have an entity, we need to get the input, and all the code I just deleted was relevant to that. So let's get that back. I see. So I'm going to have to look it up using the actor input here. So we need to know actor input, which is a read storage. Oh no, it's going to be write storage. So this is all the actor inputs. In fact, we don't even need to go through this as a rigmarole. We can do a basic version of the same thing. So we can say let input equal controlled entity, and then, which is like one of the functions in an option class, and then we're going to say, if you got an entity, you can say world.get mute and specify entity, and it will return optionally. Why is that not happy? No, it's not get. Oh, I know why. No, I don't know why. Did I use read storage? I think I probably used read storage.get. I thought that world.ext in specs had this method, but I'm not sure. Let's make Carofel happy. Rust specs. That's probably going to go to the wrong place. I probably want docs.rs, don't I? And we want specs and world.ext. That would have worked if it was a regular search. Let's have a look at the specs for world.ext class. And in here, I think there's a get or read component. Yeah, that just gets the component storage. I was hoping we could skip that step, but no. Fine. So world.read component. No, it's a write component we need. Write component and dot get mute, and then we pass the entity in, and it will return to us. And what does it return to us? It should return to us a option which contains a reference to what do we want, actor input. And if that is something, if some input, well, I'll just call this input optional then. So if we are controlling an actor, then we do this, otherwise we've got a missing entity. And we can return this, get rid of this return, and that semicolon, and then you look at that and you go, do I really need a variable for it? Maybe. And we probably don't even need to specify a type here because Rust can figure it out now. But so I can use OK or. Okay, so what we have is I think what I probably need to do is just start by reading this in the Rust book, the result, recoverable errors with the results section, Carofel, and just it'll probably refresh me, and it's probably been updated since I first read it. I didn't know if I ever actually read that properly all the way through. Like I said, I went through the book far enough to get started, then I exited with my own project, so there's probably a whole bunch of stuff I've missed. Okay. Well, wonderful. I'll have a look at this. Hopefully that informs me as to what's going on. Why is it not happy? Oh, it's just pointing out that it's not. That it has to be a mutable reference. Okay. Let's see if that compiles now. So this gets the entity it's controlling. This here gets a component within that entity called actor input, and then it passes it to this method. This method just processes the different buttons and directions and rotates the ship in the relevant sort of way. Just working our way through a bunch of compile errors. Okay, so when I came into this, I moved these two functions, but I think they were actually part of a different class. I may have got myself in trouble. Let's just have a look and see which class by looking at the diff and git. Here's my diffs, and the one I'm interested in here is called player input. Yeah, see, I've got this class called player input, and I've got a class down here called set player input, and so I need to put those. Where is player input? Here, this one. So I didn't actually grab those in the process. Where are they? Oh great, I've deleted them. I thought they were in the clipboard. Yeah, there they are. Bye again, Caraffle. Fair enough. I'm probably going to end soon too. I need to launch into my workday with some other coding that unfortunately I can't share. I just want to get to my sweet passing test. That's going to make me feel good, but it's not going to look incredibly glorious or anything, unfortunately. If you've enjoyed the stream so far, guys, I suggest you check out the Recall Singularity. Let me just jump to my Twitter stream because that's where I have all my news profile. Here we go. I'll just pull that tab out rather than bring the whole lot across. So I'm making a spaceship game, space factory game. It's me, the Recall Singularity, and so we've got like asteroid generation going on. What else have I got? Got videos about building asteroid fields. That's something I showed from the start of the stream anyway. this sort of stuff. So if you want to just be updated as to what's going on with my Space Factory game, I suggest you join me on Twitter, which is here. And let's just quickly fix the compile issues. Or it's probably actually pretty, yeah. No method named entry found. Oh, my client list class, I need to say .clients before I get entry. .clients. Okay, that's happy. I probably need to say iter or join. I need to say .join first. Those two types apparently are different. Okay, it's just pointing out I don't want a semicolon here. Entity. The driver is no longer an entity now, it's a client ID. So when I set input, I created an action somewhere here. Where did I create the action? Oh, player input, yes. So this is this should be called start flying ship. Get or create world. Yeah, this is the right one. Yeah, so my new and my newest button need to have a player ID in it as well. And then down here where I say I've got a new with button, I need to specify a client ID number. Let's just say it's client ID 2, for instance. And then down here where I expect the ship driver I expect is going to be this client ID 2. Okay, it's complaining that this is supposed to take one argument. I forgot that this whole lot here is a tuple, so I need to put that in a tuple so we can unpack from this tuple the ship as a second member. The ship doesn't know its own world ID. I think it's called client world ID. Yeah, child world. It tells me here in the error. I really love the Rust errors, they're so great. No method named first on a iterator, so I just need to quickly check that the iterator specs. Is it called head or something? So nth. I thought that there was a like a first shortcut. Yeah, I think it wants me to just use an nth as opposed to first, so we'll just say nth 0. I'm just doing a linear search through all the ships to find one that matches that world ID that the action is targeting. so this world ID here, so I need to say, so this one's a client ID, so I need to say it's converting the ID back. Yeah, I'm still not sure about this local and global world ID. I think it's probably just, I said this a bunch of times now. We might change it. Cannot infer the type for parameter F. Okay, so it doesn't know which one we're making a default of, but it's obviously going to be a client list entry or something similar. Where was it called? Client detail. Oh, and we won't say with, we'll just say or insert. Let's get rid of this. Okay, so client detail is not exposed yet from the client list, and the way to expose it is to just add it here. Okay, so we can't compare inhabits, but to compare them I just need to have equal in here. Now we've got some borrow issues. Temporary value dropped while borrowed. Okay, so creates a temporary which is freed while still in use. So the temporary value is freed at this statement. Okay. Oh, I see. So it's just saying that having this long, getting this entry and immediately inserting it. It's just saying I need to split this across 2 lines. We're going to stick with that as being the easiest, I think. And this, so I need to say client fetch is this, and then we have to use client fetch down here. And that works better. Because otherwise this is a temporary that doesn't live long enough. Oh, no, the problem was the client list was being dropped. And saying that we need to say fetch mute if we're going to change that. Cannot borrow drivers is mutable. So up here I need to say that this is mute drivers. So I can change them later. Cannot return value referencing temporary variable. So I think it's something to do with this being used here and bound as a reference while we return an OK. Well, it's not very rusty, but it should work fine. We just need just about the scope. The scope of this, it's getting locked up inside here, and until we've exited the if statement, this can't be released because of this let sum. So once it's dropped out of that, we just copy this one value. This here is fine, it's not holding the reference. That's my interpretation anyway. No, still not happy. I think it's probably just telling us that we have to do this the more basic way. So elect actor inputs. Thanks for the follows, by the way, guys. I've got quite a lot of new follows during this stream, so I appreciate that. Anyway, I better keep going. Actor inputs. It's a write data, no, write storage that contains, what does it contain? Actor input, actor inputs, and I get that by going world dot, I can just use write component, call it write storage, like this. And then with that, I can then say, oh, I'm starting to understand that this function that I've currently got a cursor highlighted in that's the function they're talking about returning, not the outer one. They're talking about returning from the lambda. And what they're saying is that we can't do this inside the lambda. Okay. Thanks for the follow, some Kylo. Sorry about everyone else who's followed me and I haven't mentioned your names. Thanks Mistal and Xing Blank, MTL Sync, Bud Pico, Corn Forever, another introvert, Fred64. Thank you to all of you for following. I appreciate it. I hope you find something you like. Oops. Yes, I need to return result here. But I think that that's actually not what I need to be doing. It's not the problem. I need to make this mute here. Even though it's the right storage, it needs to be a mutable version of the right storage to change it. Looks like it's compiled. I'm hoping I can refactor this back into something clearer because I don't like this result thing I'm doing here. Let's just delete this and deck this, and these should still compile. Okay, so it didn't run. Hi Totally Troy, I'm glad you could drop by. Feel free to ask some questions if you like. This is the RecallSingularity, which is like a space factory game. So for some reason it's probably because, oh, I know what's wrong. I know exactly what's wrong. So this is set up to run one test, which was named and I've changed the name of the test, and so when I run it again, it can't find the test. So we'll just run all the tests. You are so lucky, totally. There's quite a lot of streams on it too that I've made, so when I go offline soon, you might want to have a look through some of my backlog and find something nice you like. Hopefully you find something you'd like to see. But yeah, I'll just drop another picture or two in here just to keep things going graphically, because it's kind of boring looking at code for too long. Here's some screenshots I got. This is the asteroid generation code in action. So it's a component in Godot, and you can set its seed. And then there's another system that makes a field from these different seeds. So here's a field of them, which we were looking at earlier in the stream. And so the ship, you got little spaceships, spaceship factories made in Rust. And here's a little GIF showing factory building. So that's kind of where we're at. And at the moment we're dealing with this player input. Where did I mention it here? So, you know, place a flight console. And so you wander over with your little person and start flying the ship. So I think I made a little animation like this. This guy is like totally deciding whether he wants to use the ship or not. And so the code that we're currently coding up is to do with detecting when the person pushes a button and letting him control the ship. Thanks. And I'm on Twitter, so under the RecallSingularity you'll get lots of news in here. So let me just pop that in the Twitch stream. Got some new follows, yay! Oh cool. Turtle Rock, I'm sure I've heard your name before. What do you guys make? The keyboards, right? No, studios. Sorry. Ooh. Looks pretty AAA. Nice. Next, production floor tests. Cannot find tests in floor tiling. Yeah, I probably didn't mean for that to get imported. Oh, Left 4 Dead, that's the one I was thinking of. Yeah, it's a real pity about Evolve not taking off in terms of a multiplayer. It's really tricky when you make such an interesting game. Evolve is the one where you have like it's 4v1. That was oh my god, when I saw that game I was like, that is so awesome. But yeah, it's a real pity it just didn't work out from a... Communities are hard, you know, and multiplayer interactions are hard, and it just sounded so great on paper, and it was such great level of polish in the game, but just didn't resonate. I know, and that's always the danger for a AAA when they do something that's truly innovative, because the idea of 4v1 was massively innovative, and then it doesn't pan out. They're like, oh, never gonna do that again. We're gonna do boring and safe from now on. So you know, but yeah, hope you guys keep on doing cool stuff. Left 4 Dead was also really innovative, but it worked out, so that's great. We're looking for this failing test. It's still failing. Yep, but it only fails in a boring way. So I probably didn't put the right stuff in the test. No. So we say the driver should be client ID 2, but it was still 0. I probably didn't update it up here properly. Yeah, so that player ID must be wrong. I can't quite understand how that would be wrong. I think the other point is, yeah, so if the driver is none. Okay, so let's come down here again. Oh, I'm starting to get an inkling what's going on. I think I know what's wrong. So I think in that function, new button, I never actually assigned it to player ID. Yeah, I didn't. I saw it there for a second before I accidentally scrolled again. I need to say input.playerID is equal to player ID, like so. And then we'll run just this again. Yeah, my experience with AAA was mostly while at Sony. I saw some AAA teams and I worked at SingStar PS3, so I've got a small amount of experience there. And I've got a friend of mine who makes a AAA title still, a very well known one. So yeah, he works on Path of Exile, which is a New Zealand studio, and it has hundreds of people, but you know, it's got there from having a very small number of people. And so in those kind of studios it's possible. That test now passes. It's which is like pretty cool. I can't give you a good demo of this because, well, I probably can. Let's see, when you create a new world, how do we do the new world adding? I don't know if the client ID is being synchronized to the client and the server. Like, there's a whole bunch of detail here that isn't being synchronized yet, so I can't do a full demo. So what I have to show you is a passing test, which is kind of anticlimactic because I like to end, yeah, grinding gear, because you know, grinding gear games, because in their games you grind gear. It's very clever naming. I need to look at the clock and say, okay, that was a lot of fun. The next test to do is going to be related to, like, say, getting out of a ship, moving a ship you control, moving a player you control. I've got a whole bunch of stuff to do with initialization of players into the world that's only kind of half-assed right now. Because right now any client can join and they all control the same player, but I should probably make them so they all control their own players. So there's a lot of more detail that I need to code up and test. But today I can't work on this full time. I need to work on my contracting. So today's contracting is related to Stackflow, which is it's a company that makes milk handling robots. This one.
I'm John Baker. I'm the Managing Director of Stackflow. We've been providing machinery for automation.
So, he's my boss. If you're curious, have a look. It seems to have got stuck. I don't know why.
Automate a lot of the labour out of the core room.
So these milk moving robots.
The safety hazard, and our software means that the remaining staff are utilising the assets in the core room much more effectively than they're currently being used.
So I'm telling this machine what to move where,
the managerial staff remain easier,
like the brains of that. So that's kind of C# and PLC communication type stuff. And I've got another role that relates to rendering stuff as well in Blender for a company for testing vision. Anyway, so that's what else I have to do today. So I'm off to do that and earn some money that will let me pay for my bills so I can keep working more on games. Yay! Thanks for watching, guys. I really hope you come and hit up our Discord. One last time, I'll just drop a link in it, link to it here. Invite people. Copy. This is for you guys. Thanks. You're most welcome. And let's see if I can figure out where to drop you. Oh, and follow me on Twitter, on Twitch. Sorry, if you want to do that. I wonder who I should raid. How do I do this raid thing? Raid channel. Let's find a channel. Someone making Rust. Probably Rust games, or how would I know? Or let's do Facto. Godot. I'm number one on Godot. What are these people doing? Guild Wars, League of Legends. Yeah. Thanks, Troy. You should have a look on the subreddit. I've got a lot to say on Reddit. About game development and helping people in my own game and so on. Yeah, gotten to the end of my stream, and I'm getting to this point where I'm kind of brain dead. Like, the intensity of this, I need to make myself some get a glass of water and get some coffee or some tea and have a relax. It's been pretty intense. So please follow me on your favorite platform, and I hope to see you again. Thank you so much. And you guys who are active in the chat, I really suggest you jump on Discord and say hello. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll let you guys figure out who you're going to watch next. Thanks. Good night.